So raise your hand if you've ever had a fear of being hacked. Okay, it looks like everybody here. Well, I need to introduce myself. I'm a hacker. And I'm not only a hacker, but over the last 10 plus years, I've worked with over 300 young people from 60 countries who are hackers. Now, you don't have to worry about your cell phone or your medical records or your bank accounts, because the young people I work with are hacking gender-based violence in Botswana. They're hacking the lack of engineers in Australia, of female engineers in Australia. They're hacking honor killing in northern Pakistan. They're hacking the lack of staffing in Peruvian public hospitals. And they're even hacking the efficiencies in emergency rooms in South Africa. Why do I call these people hackers, and what does it mean to hack? And the reason I wanted to share about them is that I want to send you home today with a greater sense of hope, not only for the world, but in terms of your own life too, in a world that seems broken too often. We are hacking global changemaking, and this is what the typical young people I work with. This is a picture of 20 people from 19 different countries. They're part of a program called the Laureate Youth Action Net Global Fellows, and they exist in 22 countries. And they're providing a hopeful narrative really everywhere across this globe. So I want to tell you about two of them, and in particular, and what it means to hack. This is Nafula, and Nafula lives in Kenya. And she works with young people, and what she does is she trains them or prepares them to do events and workshops and help desks for people around the issue of gender-based violence. So that's her project. But the paradigm is there are many people in our country who have decided that sexual coercion is okay, that men are superior, and that we're not supposed to talk about this. And this is what she's trying to change. The second story I want to tell you about Donald. And Donald is a young agricultural student in Zimbabwe, and he went home for the holidays and found that even in his own country, going with his roommate, that there was poverty he had never seen before. And he went back to the university and thought, I've got to do something about this. What he came up with is a cheap fertilizer that would double the yield of the farmers. And so you think in a simple way that the problem is solved. He goes back and to the farmers and says, this is what I have, I've invented this, I've manufactured it, and they look at him and have no interest in what he's doing. And so he realizes that they've really decided a long time ago that there's no way that their lives can get better. And so they've really given up. So he goes back to his university, and what he does is he invents a course called Positive-Oriented Living. And he goes back and he teaches this to him, and it opens up possibilities, and they start to use the fertilizer and really make a difference in terms of income in their lives in that. And so the definition I use of hacking, you can see here, it's really about opening up people's perspectives. It's about opening up possibilities. It's about changing a mindset. And I'll share with you one of my favorite stories, which is we went to try to hack the mindset of the maximum security juvenile facility in southeast Minnesota. And there's 150 young men, 13 to 19 years old, and they are there because they're violent offenders, sex offenders, drug offenders, the most serious we have in our state, okay, where we are right now. And we're going to go down there, and we're going to put on a day of peace. And who we're taking to do this is 5 Tibetan monks. And so you picture, you've got 150 serious juvenile offenders, and you've got 5 monks, and you're going to put them together for a day. And I remember the night before that I felt I was on a diving board, and I had a blindfold on, and I was going to jump off the next morning. I had no idea what was going to happen. Okay, so we drive up to this place. There's 15-foot high cyclone fences with barbed wire on top. We take the monks in, and they come out in their full regalia looking just like this, and they play instruments and chant, and the young people are really respectful. So then we break up into workshops, and I have a workshop with an elder monk. And he has a younger monk to translate. In my workshop, he will tell his life story, and then the young people could ask question and answer. So he talks about at 7 years old, he walked 2 months to Lhasa to become a monk, barefoot, and begged food on the way. At a certain point, he loved his training, but at a certain point when his country was taken over by China, he escaped over the Himalayas, almost froze to death. And so here he is with a day. And I'm watching these young people. I mean, they're really glued into this guy, okay? And when we're done, one person had been given all the questions to ask because the teachers felt the students might goof off or ask crazy things. And I said, you know, you really hadn't heard yet about who this monk is. And now that you've heard his story, let's just open it up and anybody ask what they want to. Very first person raised their hands and says, you know, I've been abused in my own life, and it's been really difficult for me. You say that the Chinese have done these things to your country, but you forgive them? How do you do that? And what went on for the next 40 minutes was one of the deepest, most meaningful discussions. I can't tell you there would be no private or public school in this state that would have had a better discussion there. So then it comes to be lunchtime. And I sit down, and then this huge young man comes and sits down next to me. And so I say, you know, how was this morning? And he says, great. And I said, what was great? And he said, the monks. And I said, well, what was it about the monks? He said, well, the minute they walk in, I could tell they had no hatred or anger. Okay, so look at the depth of that. So we go through the whole day, and at the end of the day, somebody makes a comment that makes me both happy and sad. One of the young people says, thank you for treating us like the good kids. Okay, so I kind of thought that was the end of the story. It ended up, we did this for many years. But the real epilogue that's powerful in terms of the purpose of my talk today is my wife happened to be in October. This was July 2001 we're doing this. In October of 2001, my wife's in a Byerly supermarket. This woman comes up and she says, you're not going to remember me, but I'm a Red Wing teacher, and I was there that day, and I want to tell you a story. She said, September 11th, the young people I have in the counseling group after school, or at the end of the day, they are called the thug group. They're the toughest, meanest kids we have. And he says, they come in, and they're going to bomb so-and-so, and they're going to bomb so-and-so, and they're going to bomb so-and-so. And about 15 minutes into the discussion, what happens is one of the young people says, what would the Tibetan monks do? And I just love that. And he said, what happened is the next half hour, the discussion took a 180, and these young people engaged in a very different perspective on life. And it really reflects what Proust says, that Proust said, you know, the real discovery in life is not seeking new landscapes, but in seeing with new eyes. And this is really what hacking is about. I've really collected for 10 years hacking stories, and I can tell you incredible things about people that hack the mindset about old age, where people's biometrics go up just by changing the mindset. I can tell you stories about pregnancy prevention and how having young adolescent girls do community service actually lessens the risk of pregnancy because they develop a sense of worth and a sense of power about themselves. So mindsets are really powerful. And until this point, I've been talking about mindsets as something we help other people expand their perspective. I want to switch now to the other part of mindsets, which is if you work with young leaders and you're a global change maker, you yourself or the young people I work with, how do you hack your own mindset? And you might think, Einstein said, we can't solve today's problems with the same thinking that we use to create them. And think in your own life, who are the people, the experiences, the books, the travel that really transformed you? That wasn't incremental, but really you made a leap in how you see yourself and how you understand your life and maybe even choices you made in the future, things that you had. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a test to show you why that's so difficult. It happens in life, but it's not an easy thing. And what I'm going to do is for 15 seconds, I'm going to flash Melissa and Doug puzzle, and I want you to accurately count how many puzzle pieces are there. Okay? So are you ready? 15 seconds. You're on the clock. Okay, yell out your answer. This is what we call a cacophony, not a symphony. Okay, so here's the big question. Raise your hand if you know how many children were on the bus. Raise your hand if you know what time the clock said. Okay, this is what social scientists call inattentional blindness, and there are actually hilarious videos all over the internet about how this happens. And some of you are going to know the most famous one, which is the gorilla piece. And there's 6 people, 3 white shirts and 3 dark, and they pass a basketball quickly, and you're to count how many times the people with white shirts pass the basketball. Okay? And in the middle of this 1-minute video, a woman in a full gorilla suit comes out. She stops in the middle and goes like so and walks off. She's there for 7 seconds. 50% of the people don't see her. And what I love is when they show the people the video later, they say, "No way, you switched the video. This is not what I saw." Okay? And so this is really, really amazing to me in some ways, but you know why it happens? Is because everybody in this room, including myself, most of the time is on autopilot. And the reason we're on autopilot is you can't wake up every morning and reinvent the world and experience everything new. So every one of you have developed a personal model of the world that's fairly predictable, and you live within that. And generally, it's very energy efficient, and it helps you solve a lot of things and go through your day. The problem is, if you want to be a global change maker, you can't stay on autopilot. You have to look at something that everybody has agreed is one thing, and you have to think of it in a different way. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And the one we've heard for years is when a pickpocket looks at a saint, they see only his pockets, okay, as you do that. And so how do we expand our vision? How do we get out of autopilot? And what I'd like to do is share 3 different young people I work with and what their mindsets are and how they see the world differently and how that makes a difference. And so the first one is Rafael, and Rafael is in Brazil. And what he does is he was an electrical engineer, and he was making very good money, but he said, "I'm not using my talents to help the world in the way that I'd like." And so he quit his job, and he said, "I'm going to go help the waste pickers." So if you've been to Sao Paulo, you see people in the streets picking up garbage and that. Many of them are homeless, many have drug problems. And he said, in order to really understand them, this is what a design mindset is. A design mindset is you can't produce products or services for people unless you really, really understand them at a deep level. And so what Raphael did, to his credit, is he said, "I'm going to work as a waste picker for 6 months." And so he goes out and he does that, and he shows up the first day, and he said, "They're going to be kind of amazed and happy to see me come." The reality is they didn't speak to him for a week, and about 3 weeks into it, he gave a little idea, and they all looked at him like he was crazy. So he said, "I'm going to shut up and just watch them and listen to them and see what they do." And so he did that for 6 months, and it really came into a relationship in which he could co-create with them a different world. The second case is an improv mindset. And an improv mindset is one, imagine you're the second person on the stage, and I come out and say, "Hi, I'm Jack Sparrow, I'm a pirate." Or I come out and say, "A bird just built a nest on my head." Whatever I say, if you're the second person, you walk on the stage and you say, "Yes, and?" Because everything in improv is seen as a gift, anything you can build on. So what happens from that, in Sherry's story, is she's in the Philippines, and she's trying to make agriculture and farming cool, sexy, and smart. And she takes ex-cons and criminals, and she helps them set up a farm in which they're growing watermelons, and it goes really fantastic. So she's going to set up a watermelon celebration. She brings hundreds of people on buses from Manila, a 2-hour drive, and they show up. And the night before, the farmers were thinking, we're worried about if we're going to get our fair share of these watermelons. So they picked them all and sent them off somewhere else. So here you are. Your yes and is we have a watermelon festival with no watermelons. Okay, and she did that. She said, yes, Ann, and they greased a pig, they did games, and the next day she said, yes, Ann, again, because she never mentioned it to the farmers, but she realized that she needed to build more trust with them, and she started teaching reading and writing, and it's really worked. Okay, the last example I'll share is an entrepreneurial mindset. This is Kwabena in Ghana, and what entrepreneurs do is they take different pieces of the world and put them together in new ways. And what you've got a lot of in rural Ghana is unemployed young people, and the other thing you've got is lots of bamboo. And so he started Boomer's Bicycle, and they actually shipped to 5 different countries, and very successful in that. So all that said and done, just in closing, how you see the world matters. And I'd like you to think of 2 last thoughts. The first one is, we're talking about hacking as global change makers. When you go home tonight, think about hacking parenting. Think about hacking friendships. Think about hacking marriages. Think about hacking your work. Because being able to see things and expand your perspectives is often the way to change things. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so think about new ways to see that. And the very last piece is I visited a dear friend, Irene, that works at the Bing Overseas Study Center at Stanford. And I was waiting for her one day, and I opened up a booklet, and I said, well, what do they say in here about their program? And the quote that leapt out to me is by Schopenhauer, and it says, don't mistake the limits of your mind for the limits of the world. And I had the chance 20 years ago to start helping design a program where Nobel Peace Prize winners together came with young people. And it really struck me, the expansiveness of their mind, Bishop Tutu, the Dalai Lama, the presence of these people. I mean, they had mindsets, okay? But I'll just share this one last piece because I think it shows, again, how big we can get. We were working with President Oscar Arias from Costa Rica. Somebody asked President Arias the question, President Arias, he says, when did you first want to be president of Costa Rica? And without taking a breath, he smiled and said, in my mother's womb. He said, you know, there's really nothing wrong with ambition. It's what you want it for. So thank you very much. Go home, hackers.